Right, hi everybody. Thanks for watching the latest Primal Zone interview, which is with another Primal Health Coach and Health Buddy, Joel Gallant from Toronto in Canada. Hi, Joel. So, Joel and I studied at the Primal Health Institute, and the reason I wanted to get Joel on board for this chat was he has a very, very interesting story. It doesn't start particularly well, and it has a few decades as part of the story, but it's got a happier ending and it's an ongoing story. Plus, he has quite a glamorous job as well. So, Joel, hi. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, and appreciate you jumping on the Zoom?
Hello, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, glamorous job that looks like that on the surface, but right now it's pretty quiet. So I am a camera operator. And I cover professional sports. So it's very cool, very fun. A lot of locker rooms, a lot of sporting events. But as I said, right now in the past year, it's been quite quiet, which has sort of helped me transition into my health coaching role. Just with the fact that, sports aren't being played with open stadiums right now, but we're slowly getting back to it.
Good, good. Yeah, what's the lockdown situation like there for you guys?
Well, right now I'm in the suburbs of Toronto, so we're in a different situation than the main city. They've been locked down a lot more just with the higher population. So
Sure.
it's been difficult. I mean, nobody likes it. Nobody likes it on the planet, but here we are, and we can talk about metabolic health all day long and how
there
it
you
helps you
go.
fight off viruses.
That keeps us happy. That's the main thing. So you're a bit of a rock god. I know you said you're not, but you're a bit of a rock god. I've seen you perform online. I'm obviously one of your groupies. So what's the story there? What's the history behind your music?
That's more of a hobby. So my day job is the sports media, and then my hobby is just sort of campfire guitar and having fun and singing and playing once in a while. I did get into, I guess, in the last 5 or 6 years playing at pubs. So sort of turned it into a semi-professional kind of thing, but it's mostly just for fun. I love 90s music and sort of reliving that kind of stuff.
Excellent, excellent. No, well, I thoroughly enjoyed the gig that you did.
Thank you.
So obviously the main reason I wanted to interview is that you have an incredible story of primal healing. And I know that you're keen to share it. So there'll be people out there watching that will definitely be able to resonate and relate to what you've been through and what you've experienced. I know it's been over the last 30 years. So can you tell us more about that? What is your condition?
So I have Crohn's disease, diagnosed in 1993. I was about 19 years old at the time. Very much sort of following the Western medicine protocols at the time, and really didn't know what was going on. So it was sort of a tough road in the beginning, and I say the beginning, but I mean like 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Wow.
Where I was just following along with, an appointment with a doctor once every 5 or 6 months saying, oh, well, maybe we'll do this, or maybe, try this, or re-add the medication back in. And I did not know how to handle it. And, luckily, as you mentioned, over the past 27 or 28 years, I have learned a lot. And I sit before you today feeling much, much better.
Yeah. But before you get to that, I mean, obviously we've got to get to the nitty gritty of it. So how did it manifest itself, and what were the initial symptoms? I mean, how soon were you diagnosed with Crohn's after you started showing those symptoms?
So it started back in high school for me in the early 90s, and just with gas and bloating, and then lots of diarrhea. Not to get too graphic on you, but in the beginning, I just assumed, it's something you ate or whatever. And hey, I can get a note and not have to go to school today. And I was sort of fine with it. My general practitioner at the time kept prescribing me, sort of pharmaceutical grade anti-diarrhea things, like an Imodium or something like that, where it would just, help quell the symptoms, which never did anything. When it really started to manifest, where I said to my father, I think something's going on here, I was starting to see blood. And then I started to weight. So I got down really, I'm 5'8" and I carry about 165 pounds right now. I was down to about 120 pounds. So it was, my father started saying, we need to address this.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where it started really to freak me out a little bit.
So you were put on medication for most of the time. How did that make you feel in yourself? Did it calm the symptoms down? But how did it make you feel?
So in the very early going, it took a while to diagnose. It was, you know, and in the 90s, Crohn's disease was quite a bit less known than it is now. Nobody in my family had even heard of it. So it took a little while to get diagnosed, and it was one specialist and then a different specialist. And, you know, they had a supposition of what it might be or what it could be. And then we had to go through all of the diagnostic imaging and all of those things before I was diagnosed. And then it was a steady diet of anti-inflammatory drugs, which were ASA based, which is kind of like an aspirin. I think, I'm not a pharmacologist, but it was a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, and which we now know is a contributor to leaky gut. So that didn't really go hand in hand very well, in my opinion. But also prednisone, which is a steroid.
Yeah.
The prednisone is, it can be a dangerous drug to be on long term, but it definitely does its job to stop a flare and get the inflammation down. So when they put me on that, it didn't take long before I at least started to feel a little bit better.
And do they know what might have caused this?
Is
there a general cause for Crohn's?
No, and we know now that Crohn's is autoimmune, and I had never heard of autoimmune disease at the time. I didn't really know what that was at all. I didn't even know what Crohn's was. But at the time, we were really diagnosing the symptoms of an autoimmune disorder. And, you know, 28 years later, we now understand that, and we can go back to the root cause and say, well, how can we stop this autoimmune trigger? But they still don't really know what causes it. Everything is so synergistic in our body. There's for some reason, my immune system is haywire. It could either be that my immune system is attacking healthy flesh, or just that my immune system isn't working properly. But whatever it is, for me, it manifests in Crohn's. But there are over 100 autoimmune conditions, and it could manifest in a bunch of different ways, which could start with a genetic predisposition, or we're not really sure. But for me, I have really landed on stress and anxiety, where your sort of immune system really suffers when you're in that fight or flight mode too much. And I probably had some rough teenage years with parent divorce and things like that. And also just diet and environment, all of those things. So all of the things that we're really careful with in the primal lifestyle probably had some sort of contributor. And I land really heavily on the stress and anxiety piece. Yeah.
No, I hear that a lot. So what would you say was your worst time? Because you've had operations, haven't you? And
I have, yeah. So in 93, you're diagnosed, and then, you know, you're off to college and you're living on the medications, and then you're not really seeing the doctor too often. You're, you know, a silly 19, 20-year-old, and your symptoms get worse. So you think, well, maybe I'll just take a few more of those pills, or maybe, you know, I feel better, so maybe I'll take less, and all of the wrong things that, you know, people who have not fully developed their prefrontal cortex decide to do. So it was rough for the first couple of years, and then you get it under control. So you almost forget about it. You keep eating fast food, and you keep doing all of the things that you do, not knowing what causes it or how to fix it. But then after 5, 6, 7 years, all of a sudden the flares started coming back. So now at this point, I'm in a professional life. I was starting my sports media career. I had a young wife to be, and it was starting to really get bad. And that's where I got to in the year 2000, where I went back in for imaging and found out that I had a significant blockage. And in fact, what happened was I went in for a colonoscopy, and I was, you know, woken up from the sedation after that. And they said, you have a significant blockage. You've got two options. We can either try to push through it, which may poke a hole in your bowels, and then you'd need surgery, or we can just do surgery. So I opted for the former, and of course it happened. It was a low % chance that it would happen. They thought they would be able to push the blockage through, but at that time, just with the technology and with our knowledge, I guess it didn't work out that well, and I ended up in emergency surgery.
Oh my golly.
yeah, things really went awry in there, because that was the year 2000, and it took me 20 years to really delve into what happened. But long story short, I went back and got the surgical report and found out that, I almost bled out on the table. There were a lot of things going on. There were adhesions. All of my intestines and bowels where there had been damage were stuck to my abdomen, and they had to keep pulling that off. And it got really bad, but I didn't know that. And then where it got really a wake-up call for me, literally and figuratively, was when I woke up in the hospital with all kinds of tubes in me. I found out that I had a colostomy bag. And the spoiler alert, I ended up having the colostomy bag reversed later that summer. But that was pretty troubling for a young, mid-20s person who thought, well, I'm just totally fine. I have this under control. And then within a couple of days, everything had changed, and I was in the hospital for a long recovery.
And what happened with your colon?
So what ended up happening was the blockage was significant, but when they went to cut the blockage out and then sew me back together, the surgeon at the time in my hometown ended up noticing that it wasn't, when they go to sew things back together, it wasn't staying how it should. In fact, he started to smell a little bit of fecal matter. So he said, well, that's not good. Stuff is leaking out of this thing. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. And that's when they decided to interrupt the process surgically by putting a colostomy bag as a temporary measure to allow the bowels to get strong enough to heal. So when you go through something like that and the doctor's explaining it to you and you really haven't learned anything or haven't done any research about your own condition, you're just mind blown. Like, what do I do with this?
Life changing.
I lost about half the colon. We think it's difficult. Like the surgical report says, significant amount. But yeah, so I now have the colostomy bag reversed that same year, and I've lived without it successfully. But I have a shorter colon, so food goes through quite a bit quicker.
Thank you for sharing that. That was very detailed, but actually it's a bit of a wake-up call to a lot of people that may be showing initial symptoms, not only of Crohn's, but IBS or the leaky gut, etc. It's really interesting that how they almost put a sticking plaster on your symptoms rather than looking at the root cause for a long time.
Right.
So before we get onto the good stuff, I just want to know, how did that make you feel mentally? Obviously, physically we can understand, but mentally, like say, a guy in his mid-20s.
Well, mentally, I was, at the time I had a young child and we were just about to get married. And I remember questioning, like, this is really weird. This must be weird for her. And I didn't really, to another spoiler alert, she was fantastic. Like, we ended up getting through it together and everything went okay in that regard. But at the time I thought, well, I was just so worried about what my life was going to be in that situation. Sure. And it was kind of hard to figure out. But over the course of a few months, I started to learn to live with this colostomy bag that I had and that I could function. And I went back to work and everything was going to be fine. A couple of little things you notice, like, for instance, flatulence, which we can all hold in when it comes out where it's supposed to come out. Well, when it's coming out from a colostomy bag, you don't know when it's coming and it just happens. So you really learn how to start to control things like that. Like, well, maybe carbonated drinks aren't going to be the best thing for me. Sure. So you start to learn all of these things as you're going through it. But mentally, it was a struggle for a little while, for sure. I'm sure in so many ways. So what made you decide to take control? So after the year 2000, later in that year, I had the colostomy bag reversed, which was so exciting for me. It was like, the best thing. And then I decided to not go back on medication. So essentially my gastroenterologist at the time, who I've since parted ways with and switched to a different one. But at the time he said, somewhat flippantly, I would say, that he said, well, that's fine. You can make that decision if you want to, but you could end up flaring again and you'll be right back in here. And I still decided to do it because I thought, when I came out of the second surgery where the reversal happened, I felt really good. And there was just something, a gut instinct that said I could do this without medication. And a lot of the doctors at the time would say, well, you might, but that would just be dumb luck if that did happen. So I decided to start down that trajectory. And I ended up getting, and the one thing they warn you about when you have something like this done with inflammatory bowel disease is that, well, you'll probably end up back in surgery in 7 to 10 years. That seems to be the underlying idea. If you have one surgery, it's just, you'll get away for a little while, but eventually it's going to come back in a cyclical nature. I didn't like the sounds of that. So I did change my lifestyle, and this is back in the year 2000 now, where I started exercising a little more and I started eating a little better, maybe not fast food as often. I cut out soda pop and things like that. But really, I didn't know what I was doing at all. No. I just felt like I was being healthier. And I think a lot of it was luck that it didn't come back right away, because I didn't learn anything about, and in fact, there wasn't very much information out there about diet and nutrition and things like that. I mean, the internet was brand new.
Yeah, that was 20 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and what we knew about Crohn's disease was really pretty new at the time as well. So I went through a full 15 to 18 years without really having problems. Symptoms once in a while, some diarrhea once in a while, and loose stools and things, which can be attributed to the shorter colon. But really, it went okay. And then I hit a bit of a road bump in 2018.
So what
Want to hear about that?
Yeah, I do.
So basically what happened was I ended up separating from my wife in 2013, and I had a little bit of a stressful run. And my answer to feeling emotional stress is to go to the gym and add some physical stress on top of it. I've since learned that's not the best idea. That's, your body doesn't really know. It just knows that it is in fact feeling stress.
Sure.
So I sort of went through my breakup that way by exercising a lot and really beating up my body. And I guess in hindsight, it got worse and worse. Coincidentally, I had taken a long time in between visiting my gastroenterologist. So I went from about 2012 to 2018 without doing that. 2018, I went in for what I thought was a routine colonoscopy. When I came out of the colonoscopy, my gastroenterologist, we did a follow-up appointment a few weeks later, and he said, you have some significant damage going on in the colon and in the small intestine. And I see a lot of ulceration, so I really think we're going to put you on some medication. And he sort of said it matter-of-factly, like it wasn't a question. It was just like, this
no choice.
Action. Yeah. And the medications have changed a lot since the early 90s. Somewhere along that 20-year run, they decided, and by they, I mean medical science, that would be the best way. We now know Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disorder. And if we shut down your immune system, then the symptoms should stop. That comes with a lot of side effects.
Absolutely.
Shutting down your immune system, that's not to be played with. So I didn't like the idea. I sat there for a half an hour arguing with him, and not arguing, but just asking questions. And he was very good. Eventually he had to pass me off to one of the nurses because he had other appointments, and we continued the discussion. But I didn't like it. So I left there with all of these pamphlets for a medication, and I went straight to my naturopath office and asked them to get me in right away. And then we talked, and that was the first time I had ever heard of the autoimmune protocol diet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what you were just saying about the medication, what was it, the autoimmune medication?
Yeah, an immunosuppressant.
Yeah,
so
I mean, yeah, as we discussed before we started recording, with the virus that's out there at the moment, you've just got to hide yourself away and be totally protected because your immune system's been shut down.
Right. Yeah. The last thing you want to do is shut down your immune system if you can help it. Now, I don't want to say that it's, everybody can do exactly what I did. I do believe that there's a lot of the population that could, and maybe some people need a medication, and that's
Absolutely.
totally
There's a place
possible.
for it. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a medical doctor to be able to prescribe or not prescribe, time and place for everything. But I think for the most part, a lot of us can look at the root cause. And even if we're on a medication, we can start to address what the root cause might be and at least mitigate those symptoms and see where we're at.
So was hearing about AIP, the autoimmune protocol, was that your light bulb moment, do you think, when you realized there was going to be something you could do to help yourself?
It really was. My naturopath, I can mention his name, Dr. Beatty here in Whitby, Ontario. He, he sort of looked across the desk and he said, okay, take a breath. You have options. And he said, you're not really feeling symptoms. I understand there's ulceration in the imaging. I get it. But you have some options and let's talk about this. And we started talking about, he breaks it down into, the AIP is a pretty strict elimination diet for people who, especially for people coming from a standard American diet. Luckily,
Sure.
I was at sort of a different phase in my eating, so I was closer to being able to jump right into it. But he breaks it up into levels, like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where he starts to eliminate things for you and then get to the point where you can eliminate a lot of the stuff. It's really not that far from what we do in the primal community.
Exactly.
In that it's paleo based. And there are just a lot of eliminations in the beginning, so you can figure out what is triggering you.
Sure.
And if you have an autoimmune condition, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis or Crohn's or colitis or whatever it might be, you can start to eliminate all of these things and reintroduce them really slowly.
I was going to say, you can reintroduce, can't you? So obviously you find out what your triggers are, and then you can start slowly reintroducing. So it's not like you have to eliminate everything forever. It's just working out what your triggers actually are, for sure.
Yeah, and you start with the big ones and take them all out, and then give yourself a few months where you're just eating fairly strict paleo with some more elimination. For instance, eggs comes out, and at the beginning, I've reintroduced them now, and chocolate comes out at the beginning, but I've reintroduced that, and all of these things come out in the early going, and then you just bit by bit, and you see, well, do I have any little symptom of reaction that could be creating something bigger inside that I don't know about? So whether it's itchy, watery eyes, or any sort of allergic type thing, pain in your joints, stuff like that, and then you can decide, well, that one doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, because it can be joints, it can be skin, it can be gut, it can be, as you said, your eyes even. There's so many areas of your body that can be affected.
Right.
And some of those triggers, I guess, can happen straight away. I mean, you can sense the reaction immediately, whereas, as you were saying earlier, sometimes your triggers don't reveal themselves immediately.
Right, yeah, and you might feel something that it just feels like, oh, I'm getting older, it's an ache or a pain, or it's whatever, and you sort of don't think about it. But when you're in an autoimmune protocol diet, you can start to notice these little things and actually take notice. So you're being hyper aware of what's going on and saying, oh, wait a minute, that didn't normally happen. And of course, the people in your life are going to say, oh, it could be dry in here. Oh, you could have twisted something. Oh, you could have this or that. But I think it's important for us to know our own body. And you wouldn't believe how well I know my body now. Like, I can feel inflammation before my blood work even shows it. Like I notice little things that happen so fast, and I say, okay, well, I want to stop that from happening now, so it doesn't manifest into a bigger autoimmune reaction.
Sure. Now, I know as well, bearing in mind all those things that you've told us about, and the operations you've been through, and the trials and tribulations of your condition, that you're as fit as anything. You're running. I've seen you on a trampoline. I've seen you doing all sorts of things. Is there anything that you're restricted doing?
No, not really. So when I started my primal journey, after sort of going through the autoimmune protocol elimination phase, and I start to reintroduce things, and then I really got into podcasts and books and all of the things, because I've just really gotten so excited about learning about longevity and optimal health in every way. And that's what led me to the primal sort of mentality and lifestyle. So now I'm really following the primal laws as far as my exercise and things like that go.
Sure.
So I'm trying to do things that are fun, like jumping on a trampoline, which is, great for your system in a lot of ways, but also get your heart rate up a little and get you moving.
Makes you laugh.
Yeah, it makes you laugh. So you try not to look at your reflection because things are jiggling where you don't want them to or whatever. But it's and just having fun. And I've really cut down weightlifting to maybe once a week. I'm obviously not a big muscle bound person, but just something to keep my muscles from atrophying and all of that.
Sure.
And a lot of walking, and so I do get a lot of exercise, and I do move my heart rate into different zones as much as I can, but I also don't push my body as hard as I used to. So
Good.
Gentle things like yoga and stuff like that, but
Yeah,
I'm not really limited. I can go out and do things. I just don't want to have a stress response to doing too much.
Of course. Well, what I was trying to get at though is you're living a full and happy life.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and medication free since the year 2000, which
that is amazing,
mind blowing to me. And then that little road bump in 2018 where the doctor said, you're going to have to go on this because this is going to get bad. And I never really finished the punchline to that story, but 2018 the colonoscopy shows that. I start the AIP protocol a couple of months later. I eased into it a little bit, and I changed my lifestyle completely. And I started adding in all of these wellness practices that I do. And, just because I wanted to try everything, I wanted to throw everything at this and see what I could do. And the punchline to the story is I went back exactly 1 year later for another colonoscopy, and the doctor looked across the table and he said, I think he almost didn't remember that I had been there a year ago. Like, I'm sure it was in his notes, but he wasn't really thinking about it. And he said, yeah, so I'm just looking at your results here. It looks like a pretty clean colonoscopy. Good. Maybe come back in a year and we'll take a look again. And I said, Doc, do you remember that? Yeah, we were going to put you on medication. Oh, okay. So what did you do? I said, well, I did a lot of different things. He goes, yeah, so I guess that's good. So he really wasn't as excited to hear about it as I had.
As you were.
But I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I walked out of that office that day in the fall of 2019, and I took the stairs. I always take the stairs, and I was in the stairwell, and I just stopped for a second, and I had tears in my eyes.
Yeah,
and I'm not a big emotional. It's probably part of my anxiety is I don't let it out enough. But I teared right up, and I thought, this is unbelievable. Like, I just reversed damage. Like, that doesn't happen.
That's amazing.
Generally for people.
No.
So super excited about that. And yeah, I've been living that full and vibrant life since without any issues. I went back for another one in 2020, same thing. He said, oh, looks good. Come back in a year or two, whatever you want.
Brilliant. So. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, that is such a good story. So for people listening that may be suffering with inflammatory gut conditions, IBS, Crohn's, for instance, what would your words of wisdom be?
Right. I think the most important thing is just to know your own body, like learn as much as you can about what's going on in there, and just don't put it in somebody else's hands. And I'm not saying don't listen to your doctor. I'm not saying don't listen to health professionals or the information we know out there, but take it all into account and listen to more than one side, because there are other medical professionals who are going to have a different opinion, who are going to say, well, what about this? What about, the root cause? And I think that's what we want to do for any condition, whether it's, you helping your clients with inflammation as they get older, or metabolic dysfunction, things like that.
Absolutely.
We want to learn everything instead of just saying, oh, well, what do I do? And letting somebody else control it in every way. There are
Sure. I mean, as we said at the beginning, an absolute place for medication and for the medical profession, and they are superheroes, absolute superheroes. But it's been aware, like you said, it's been aware of our own bodies and actually taking our own lives into our own hands, where we can. And you've done it and I've done it in very different scenarios, but totally. I can sense myself when I've got some inflammation happening, and I know what to do about it now. But
Great.
so I guess as well, one of the big things, and you've said this a few times to me, is about calming the trigger. So find out what your triggers are, and then, you know, do what you can to calm those down.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's, I mean, because if you're just letting something fester that seems really small, we're not really sure, you know, what it might be doing inside. So I like to address any little thing. It drives my family people crazy. You know, you eat something and you say, oh, well, this happened. I ate this last night. I wonder what's going on here. And then, well, can't you just enjoy it for what it is? Can't you do this? And it's like, well, yeah, I could, but also I really want to know. And it's a fascination for me. I have a lot of fun with it. Like this is, I mean, I have a lot of fun with Crohn's disease per se, but I do take it as a blessing in some ways, because I'm here talking to you about it now, almost 30 years later.
Totally.
And I'm able to help people. And you know, it's funny because when I have something happen, like I've had a little bit of joint pain in my knees this past couple of weeks, and I think to myself, like, it sure bothers me, but also I'm excited to try to figure out what it is. And so there's that small part of me that's like, you know, feels like this is all a blessing, because it's led me down another path where I can learn about something super interesting and then pass that information on to other people.
Absolutely. And one thing you said as well about your family not being so patient with you is what I try and say to my clients and people that are interested, you know, if you do have something that you know probably isn't going to be the best thing for you, just be mindful about how it makes you feel. Enjoy it, don't moan about it. Yeah, if you're going to have it, just do it and then forget about it, but be very mindful about how it makes you feel that day, the next day, but otherwise enjoy.
Mark Sisson, who created the Primal Blueprint and sort of the lifestyle that we live by, you know, he says this all the time. He said, you know, once in a while I'm going to partake in something. Maybe my family made some food that is really good, and I'm not going to say no, but I do understand that I might pay for it a little bit. And if I do, I do. And then I just let it go and I move on and I get right back to what I was doing the day before. So
absolutely. Wow, Joel, I mean, you've shared an awful lot and I really, really appreciate it. I know it's going to be very interesting for a lot of people out there. So I would say to people that are listening, if you have any questions, bung them over to me, or Joel's more than happy to take calls from you directly. But yeah, just put something in direct messenger to us, and we'll be delighted to answer any further questions. We thought by recording this, it'd be easier than having it live, because obviously Joel's got an awful lot to say, and if people were asking questions at the same time, we'd be going on for another couple of hours. So Joel, thank you so much. And would you be happy to come back another time if people have got a lot of questions for you, and do another session together?
Absolutely. I would love it. And, you know, people can look me up on Twitter. I'm at primaljoel_. I couldn't get that handle for some reason. And then on Instagram, it's just at primaljoel. But my direct messages are open on Twitter if anybody ever had a question or something like that. And then certainly they can just ask you any questions they want.
Cool. Well, what I'll do is I'll put your contact details on the post section when I post this video up. But no, thank you so much. It's been great having this chat with you. And I was thinking about the Primal community. I mean, it's a global community, and I think we're so lucky that we have so many fellow coaches around the world with so much knowledge, either from their own experience or from the people they've already been coaching and working with, that we can have this collaborative effect. And you know, if I haven't got the answer, if you haven't got the answer, we always know there's somebody else out there that has got the answer. So no, it's been absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Coach Sheila. It was great. And anytime you want to have me back, I'm willing to go.
Thank you very much. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.